Hello and welcome to Economic Forum, a program where we discuss various issues affecting our economy in Zimbabwe. These can be issues to do with law, to do with mining, to do with technology, manufacturing, human capital, politics. We discuss them here in order to see how they can help us in developing our economy. My name is John Masugu. In many instances, His Excellency, the President of Zimbabwe, Comrade Emerson Mnangagwa, has said devolution is an important building block in realizing Vision 2030. He has said that when we use it properly, when we do it properly, we'll be able to develop the country economically. And in his office, he has set up a section that actually promotes devolution. And we are honored today to have the Permanent Secretary for Presidential Affairs and Devolution in the Office of the President and the Cabinet. That's Engineer Tafadzwa Muguti, who is our guest today. Welcome to the program, Permanent Secretary.
Thank you very much, Amasu.
Yes.
Thank you for having us.
We've talked about devolution in many instances, and maybe many members of the public do not understand what it is because they also hear about decentralization, deconcentration, and other aspects of local governance. Yeah. If you can take us from there so that we understand your role and how this role is going to lead to economic development, as His Excellency the President has said.
What His Excellency is aiming to achieve by establishing Presidential Affairs and Devolution Office and having a cabinet minister in the form of Honorable Senator Love Mumatuke, who's now the minister responsible for Presidential Affairs and Devolution, is to try and bring the agenda of government evolving to sub-national structures of government in a similar way to what other countries have done internationally and within the region. So in the Constitution, Section 301, subsection 3, clearly articulates that in line with the Constitution, we have devolved to 3 tiers of government. So we have central government, we have provincial government, and we have local government. The debate is still on what local government structure means, if it's the local authority or another structure that supervises local authorities as local government. But for now, let's take it as local authorities. Apart from that, the Constitution also allows for the formation of not only cabinet, parliament, but it also goes on to talk about provincial councils. So we've got 3 legislative structures, that being parliament at central government level, and the executive being cabinet, and then a provincial council being a legislative arm, and obviously the Minister of State being representing the executive, the government structure at subnational level, and at lower level we've got the councils already at the local authority, and the executive being the management and staff, town clerks, etc. So what we do have through devolution is the devolving of power, please not law, but decision making to be able to go to lower tiers of government. So we are saying at provincial level and at local level, the Constitution allows for people to have a say, number 1, over their beneficiation, number 2, over their endowments, and number 3, over their development planning. So essentially that's what devolution is all about. The decentralization on the other part is when we are administratively creating structures to decentralize. So for example, the district structures, that's part of government decentralization. But when you look at devolution, it's now devolving the actual functionality of government in its entirety to all subnational levels. We are not reinventing the wheel. The beauty about Zimbabwe is our forefathers already had a vision. And His Excellency is one of our forefathers. We had that vision. When I grew up, there was something called Vidigo. And it only took me when I got into government to understand that Vidigo was an integral part of devolution, because the Village Development Committee announced the propagation of bottom-up approach. So we went from Vidigos, we went to the districts, we went even to the Provincial Development Committee, which then fed into the national structures. So it's about making the people on the ground understand that they have a decision that they can make.
So why did we settle for devolution, especially when we look at wanting to make sure that the provinces, the devolved provinces, also develop economically?
So essentially, we we are aligned with the revolution of ZANU-PF, the ruling party. We're pro-power, pro-poor, ideological, contexted country in the fact that His Excellency would like to see a lot of the marginalized communities also get preference. The Constitution allows us up to 5% of national revenues to be shared amongst all provinces and local authorities. But what is very clear to us is that we need to facilitate a structure which allows for the communities which do not have infrastructure, which do not have social amenities, which do not have basic available services to also close the gap with those communities which are already advanced. So you'll find that as we devolve, we'll find more development in the rural areas compared to the urban areas, so that there's better roads, better schools, better clinics, and other services. That's the power of devolution.
What is the level of responsibility that is required from the citizens when they are given such a democratic space in order to improve their own communities?
It starts first with who you choose into leadership, because quite frankly, the provincial council is an elected structure of government, and their role is just like any legislative arm, is to have policy direction, to be policy makers. So it comes down to the fact that the decisions which are being made, if it is a clinic, if it is a road or a bridge, is it what the people said? So we need leaders on the ground who consult with the residents, who consult with the citizens to say, what do you want us to do with devolution funds? But it even goes down to endowments. We are opening mines, we're opening big industries in rural areas every single time in marginalized communities. Are we consulting the people? Are the people having a say? And are those people also going to benefit from those endowments? Or we're going to find a big lithium mine which destroyed roads and nothing else being left behind for the citizens. So it starts first with the policymakers being able to consult the people. We need a bottom-up approach. It's because those are the beneficiaries of everything that we're doing as government.
That's Engineer Tafadzwa Muguti. Engineer Muguti is here in order to explain what devolution is all about, how government is going into a process of actually devolving power. And as he explicitly explained, it's devolution of power and not of the law. We will continue with this discussion on the devolution of power with Engineer Tafadzwa Muguti in the second segment of Economic Forum. We are now in the second segment of Economic Forum, where today we are discussing devolution, and our guest is the Permanent Secretary in the President's Office in charge of Presidential Affairs as well as devolution. Yes. That's Engineer Tafadzwa Muguti. Yes. He has just defined what devolution is all about. So let's go to the structures. Having been devolved, what will be the structures be like out there in the provinces?
So what we're going to have in the province, there's a clear separation between the legislative arm and the executive. Let me start off saying, first of all, by explaining that the office of the Minister of State for Provincial Affairs and Devolution is not any different from the office of the Premier in other countries, from the office of the Governor in other countries. In Zimbabwe, our nomenclature is that it is the office of the Minister of State for Provincial Affairs and Devolution. This is the devolved office of the President and Cabinet at provincial level. That automatically forms the executive arm of government. That office is the most senior office in the province, and we've given it as government the necessary tools, the necessary resources, and the necessary human capital to be able to have a structure which supports the trajectory which we want to go. So within that office, there's also a secretary for Provincial Affairs and Devolution who becomes the senior civil servant there. Under him, there are different directors, different economic departments, infrastructure departments, various arms of government that can be able to then coordinate all provincial ministries, departments, and agencies. So, for example, at central government, we're expecting that each line ministry, department, and agency devolves to the 3 tiers. That it means that if it is education, with people at your head office, at the Ministry of Education, we expect also to have a provincial office. That's why you find there's a provincial education director. But we also expect to see you at the lowest level. In this case, the administrative lowest level is district in the context of Zimbabwe. So from that part, we now know that not only are we getting policy direction, but the actual implementation and the day-to-day provision of services to our citizens should be done by the lowest tier of government. We do not want people to travel all the way to from Mtorashanga to come to Harare to get an ID. There should be a district office in every single corner of Zimbabwe where we can provide government services, where we can provide any form of services that is required. So for us, the vision of His Excellency is that at that level, let there be a provincial council, which is already mandated within the Constitution. And we have done amendments to the Constitution to also facilitate that we have a quota of women empowerment, who are also part of that, but so that there's transparency and democracy at that level. However, the provincial council will now be able to give policy direction in terms of where the province is going. But there has to be alignment between the local governance, the local authorities in the province, with the provincial structure. So currently we have now driven ourselves towards the stage where His Excellency wants to see provincial GDPs. So we are moving away from administrative provincial structures to economic provincial structures.
Where you expect a chief or headman to actually understand
we expect the chief and headman to understand what is your village known for. We appreciate that, yes, we're at a traditional level, but that's why you'd find the president is now pushing to say, let's have village business units. We're going back to what you did when you came back from the war. You established VITCOs. You established village development committees where people would sit down and say, in this village, that's what we saw in the Machekes. We saw it in the Murewas. We saw it in different parts of the country where every district found what is our skill set, what are our endowments. We've got abundant water. We've got good soils. So let's go into crop production. And we found in other places where people became known for kuveza, sculpture. They found that as an entire village, they were going to focus on that. Even in the city centers, we had certain districts or certain wards where we knew unit D, all these things came out of people being able to sit down as communities to say, how do we surpass poverty? So it's not every province where you can grow maize, but surely in your province you should know what is it that will guarantee food security, what is it that will create jobs, what is it which will become the blueprint that now makes the province tick on a daily basis. So we even want to get to the position where we start tracking the provincial production index. If it's gold, how many tons have you produced? If it is maize, how many tons have you produced? What is your yield in terms of averages? So when budgets are approved, the provincial council is involved. They know exactly what is going on. But we are going to have to start also hearing from other stakeholders how we want to go forward. But the anchor of everything we want to do is still on the statement by His Excellency that he continues to say, leaving no one and no place behind. And that's what devolution is all about. Yeah.
That's Engineer Tafadzwa Muguti, who is the Permanent Secretary for Presidential Affairs and Devolution in the Office of the President and Cabinet. We are now in the third segment of Economic Forum, where today we are discussing devolution with the Permanent Secretary for Presidential Affairs and Devolution in the Office of the President and the Cabinet, and that's Engineer Tafadzwa Muguti. In the last segments, he has given us a definition of devolution, decentralization, and also some of the issues that are to do with how communities can take advantage of that. So now we want to look at the state of readiness. You know, changing the mind, changing the ways of doing things can sometimes be a problem. Are we ready? Are people ready for all this that you're talking about?
There's nothing new under the sun. His Excellency has basically given us a vision which has always been there before, and he has taken it to another level. In this regard, as I mentioned earlier to the viewers, we had VITCOS, which was the Village Development Committee, and we are now simply saying that We want to modernize, industrialize, and digitize all our communities to make sure that at least they are operating within the realms of the fourth revolution, industrial revolution. So where we are currently in the state of preparedness is, as government, the executive structures have already been put in place, and there is already a cabinet directive for line ministries to decentralize. So you are going to start seeing that currently in the last few years, due to the lack of resources, we had an upside down pyramid. What it means in terms of devolution, in terms of decentralization rather, is that we had more people at head offices and less people at subnational structures. And His Excellency has ordered for the decentralization of government through the devolution and decentralization policy of 20 August 2020 that he launched. And the policy simplifies that we should be seeing an upright triangle. Less people in government head offices, less people there. Let's have more people at the provincial people and even more people at the district levels. And so it means that the state of preparedness, the framework for devolution is already in place. Of course, the consultative process has already started. His Excellency has given everyone through cabinet his vision where we need to go. And the apex body becomes now the Public Service Commission, the Ministry of Finance, Economic Development, Investment Promotion, and of course the Ministry of Local Government and Public Works, for the main reason that these are the three which basically supersede and have, and obviously the overseeing body being the office of the president itself.
And out there, the main question is the people themselves.
But that's where the but is. When Malaysia began this process, the message from the rice fields to the boardroom was the same. When United Arab Emirates began this journey, the message right from the ports to the boardroom and to the palace was the same. On average, when we ask any 5 to 10 people about what is devolution, even in the studio, everyone has got their own understanding. So government is prepared to put enough education, enough consultations, and enough learning platforms so that people can understand the 3 tiers of government. You can imagine that our constitution, since it was amended, and we have one very good constitution, very few people understood devolution until it came to the electorate or the amendments thereof. So as it is, we want to make sure that every Zimbabwean citizen understands that they have a right to be able to access and enjoy the endowments, but within the framework of devolution. So as it is, other countries out there have already gone beyond. They are now talking about fiscal devolution. They are now talking about fiscal equalization. They are now talking about how do communities earn shares and royalties from their own endowments. So we still have a long journey to go, but the beauty about it is through His Excellency the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Dr. Idi Mnangagwa, we have a clear path on what we need to achieve.
How about financing all these processes, the budget? Normally, when it comes from central government, it's easy to allocate. But if you're going to actually have your own budget and make money from your provinces, others may lag behind because of the kind of resources that they have. How is devolution going to ensure that other provinces that don't have as many natural resources or they've not yet discovered them don't suffer?
Oh, we'll make sure that you discover them. But what is very important is the theory of fiscal equalization is in the aspect of how equitably provinces can benefit from national resources. So currently a good example is Umzarabani oil. What they've done in other countries to ensure that the province with the endowments benefits more and all the other provinces also benefit. So that's something that is in the pipeline. We're obviously being guided all the way. But what is very critical for us is to understand there's no corner of this country which does not have an endowment.
And the devolved provinces, how do they relate with the international community? We have central government. Are you able to hear that maybe Nkai is communicating directly with Germany?
No, central government still plays that role. We still have a head of state, and everything is going through the line minister, the Minister of Foreign Affairs. We have only one gateway to the rest of the world, and we have only one door for the rest of the world to enter. That is the Minister of Foreign Affairs. And obviously the Presidium is leading that engagement and re-engagement process. But I'm happy to tell the viewers that we are already at a stage where His Excellency has facilitated for twinning of provinces with other international countries which are friendly to Zimbabwe and where we can learn. But the twinning is being done in such a way that there is cross-beneficiation. So we're seeing that in Bulawayo, we're seeing it already in Matabeleland North, we're seeing it with the Harare Metropolitan Province, we're seeing it with Midlands, we're seeing it with a number of provinces. But it has to be aligned with your provincial economic development trajectory.
Engineer Muguti, we see that in the city of Harare, a commission has been set up by government in order to help strengthen the structures and governance. Is this an example of how devolution is going to work? Will that be the role of government?
Exactly. The Constitution allows for the devolution of power responsibilities for people to make their decisions. But government is entitled by the Constitution. It can also take back those powers if you fail to deliver. Because government, or central government rather, still has the responsibility to be able to oversee how the country is running. So a good example of how devolution in the past could have helped is the fact that currently people in Bari staying in old flats which belong to the local authority, it's at the lowest tier of government, staying in the midst of rubbish at the lowest tier of government, what is their expectation, even yours, is simply we're looking up to the central government to intervene. Because ultimately, this is where the country's decisions are made. However, devolution will allow us to bring accountability. But most of all, it will clearly articulate the role and responsibility of the three tiers of government. Currently as government, we've found ourselves now getting involved in road rehabilitation, found ourselves now in water treatment as interventions. But quite clearly, there are revenue structures at the lowest tier of government, which is the only structure of government which is allowed to also collect taxes, which is local authorities. So there should be sufficient enough capacity there for them to be able to clean their roads, for them to be able to repair their roads, for them to be able to rehabilitate and rejuvenate the basic social environment within Harare, and even give sporting facilities. You grew up swimming in Highfields and other places with community swimming pools, with community basketball courts, tennis courts, soccer pitches. You don't see them now. So from a government's perspective, devolution is going to bring that role, that responsibility to every tier of government. But government will not hesitate to go to the lowest tier of government to make sure it resurrects the situation from going against the will of the people.
Well, we would like to thank you very much, Permanent Secretary Engineer Tafadzwa Muguti. The Permanent Secretary has been talking about devolution and its benefits to the citizens of Zimbabwe. So what remains is for me to remind you that if you'd like to get in touch with us, you can do so on the numbers that are showing on your screen. We can discuss such issues as devolution and raise questions from what the Permanent Secretary was talking about. If you'd like to engage with us, you can do so on the social media platforms that again are showing on your screen. If you have missed some of the episodes of Economic Forum, you can actually watch them on our YouTube channel, which is Economic Forum Zimbabwe. So on behalf of our visitor, our guest, that is the Permanent Secretary for Presidential Affairs and Devolution, Engineer Tafadzwa Muguti, who has been telling us about all things devolution and the production crew. This is John Masugu wishing you happy viewing.